Sheila ma'am. Sheila ma'am.
என்னடாமா?
Hello.
Yes, Smilan.
Ma'am, she is having trouble in connecting. She is trying to connect it, but it is not allowing na சொல்றாங்க.
Dharmi,
ஜூலியட், இந்த நேத்த மாதிரி
Juliet, Juliet, can you just see what can be done? Juliet,
மேம் அவங்க என்ன நேம்ல மேம் வராங்க?
NNR. Yes,
Smilan.
ma'am.
In what name is
joined,
she
ma'am.
signing in?
Smilan என்ன நேம்ல
In what name is she
Ma'am,
signing in?
yesterday she joined. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Smilan?
ma'am. Yesterday she joined this NR, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'm here.
NR.
Yeah,
NR
she
is
joined.
there already. Yeah, she
Ma'am, she
signed in.
joined. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Nimi,
Hi, ma'am. I am trying to share my screen, so let me know if you can see my screen right now.
okay.
Are you able to?
You can show your, you can switch on your video mode, Nimi.
Ma'am, I'm not able to. I think I have some problem in my webcam today.
Oh,
So, are you able to see my screen, ma'am?
no.
Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm actually stuck up in my office, ma'am. I had to come back to office today for some emergency, so that's why the things aren't working per se. So I am in the presenter mode now. Let me.
You're not able to see that.
Sorry, an error occurred while screen sharing. That's the message I get, ma'am. It says the meeting. I mean, have you disabled my screen sharing, ma'am?
No, nobody.
Okay, let me sign
Dharmi,
out.
can you look into that? Dharmi?
Ma'am?
She's asking whether we have disabled her screen sharing.
No, ma'am.
No, Nimi.
Okay. Because the present now, suddenly it was active, now it's gone gray, ma'am. I cannot do it. And it says you do not have permissions.
I think you'll have to log out and then come in again.
Okay, let me try that, ma'am.
Yeah, you try that.
Smilan, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I can hear you, Nimi, but the screen is gray. It's plain.
Ma'am, what I get is can't share your screen. You must be granted permission in order to screen share.
Juliet, can you look into that? Yesterday you were able to do that.
Yes, ma'am, I was able to do it yesterday.
Yeah. Is it the same system?
Yes, ma'am, it's the same system.
Sheila ma'am, if she can send her PowerPoint to us.
You can send your PPT to us.
Okay, ma'am. Shall I give me an email ID and I'll send it right
Yeah.
over.
Sheila627 SHEILA.
1 minute, ma'am. Sorry. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
SHEILA
Yes, ma'am.
627
627.
@gmail.com.
Okay. I'm attaching my slide to you and sending it over, ma'am.
Okay. Juliet, I'm sending it to you.
You must have received it by now, ma'am.
Not yet. Not yet, Nimi.
I've already sent it, ma'am.
Still not reached. Yeah, it's come. Juliet?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Juliet, I'm forwarding it to you.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Forwarding it to you and Tarmi.
Okay, ma'am. I think the presentation is opening.
Ma'am, can you?
Okay. Yeah, we are able to see the presentation.
Okay, great, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, so can we
So
start
sorry
then?
for the delay. Yes,
No
ma'am, sure.
problem, no problem, Nimi. Take your time, no problem. We'll start with the prayer and the teaser and the introduction. By then you can settle down, okay?
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, first you can show your face and then maybe we could go to the presentation.
Ma'am, the camera is not picking it up. So
Okay, okay, no problem, no problem. You can put this on the slide show mode. We'll start with the prayer.
Yes, ma'am.
A warm good morning to all of you who are gathered here. A very warm good morning. Hope you had a pleasant evening. We extend a cordial welcome to all participants for the fourth day of this FDP webinar series 3. Before we begin with a prayer. I hand over this session to Dr. Curran Martina for the prayer. Curran?
Yes, ma'am. Let us all take a prayerful attitude, seeking the Lord's blessings today. Almighty God, we praise and magnify your holy name as we have gathered together in your miraculous presence this morning, seeking your blessings on the sessions of the fourth day of the Stride webinar series organized by the Center for Research, Development and Publications, Holy Cross College, Trichy. Lord, may your guidance and wisdom surround and empower the resource persons, Dr. Nirmala Arul Ryan, Program Manager, A-Star Agency for Science, Technology and Research, Genome Institute of Singapore, and Professor Richard Rose, Professor Emeritus in Inclusive Education, University of Northampton, UK. Implore your choicest blessings on them and may their efforts today result in blessed outcomes. May your providential care and protective arms hold us and lead us to achieve greater heights, contributing to our professional and personal growth in all walks of life. We raise our hearts in prayer and worship your holy name, believing that you make all things possible. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Turin.
Thank you.
The audio of Nimi, can you just mute your audio? Dr. Nirmala, can you mute your audio for a few minutes? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now have the teaser. Over to Juliet. Dr. Juliet.
Online session not increased.
Thank you, Juliet. And that was a teaser giving you a glimpse of the entire 6 days FDP. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
We are very honored today to have an illustrious alumni of Holy Cross College with us, Dr. Nirmala Arun Ryan. So she will be our first speaker. She works as a program manager in the Genome Institute at Singapore. I now hand over the session to Smilan, Dr. Smilan, Assistant Professor in the Department of Biotechnology, to introduce the speaker and moderate the session. Over to Smilan.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining with us on the 4th day of FDP Webinar Series 3, organized by Center for Research and Publication, Holy Cross College, Trichy. On behalf of the Holy Cross College and the organizing team, I do hereby welcome the distinguished speakers of today's session, Dr. Nirmala Arul Rayan and Professor Richard Rose, and all the dignitaries who are also sharing their time with us in this event. It's my special privilege to welcome Dr. Nirmala Arul Rayan, Research Associate Scientist, Agency for Science Technology Research, Genome Institute of Singapore. She is the proud alumni of Holy Cross College by receiving undergraduation from Zoology Department and doctorate from Department of Biotechnology, Holy Cross College, and post-graduation from Bharatdasan University, Trichy. To her credit, she had presented and published scientific findings in various national and international reputed journals, and a special mention of 2 publications in Nature. Soon after her graduation, she was appointed in GIS Singapore. The benchmark set by the graduates like you is itself a proof that our institution graph has been steadily going up. By training, she is a neurobiologist, but for over a decade, she has been used conventional newest omics technology to answer exciting questions on brain physiology, development, and disease. Dr. Ryan is the program manager of SCISSOR, Single Cell In Situ Spatial Omics at Subcellular Resolution, which was a well-supported multidisciplinary program that aims to introduce new paradigm for cancer biology and diagnostic. She coordinates the SCISSOR and track progress of the project across major partner institutions, to name a few like NCCS, SGH, Duke, NUS, BII, and drives program engagement with industry partners. We are honored to have one such scientist and researcher with us today in her busy schedule. We welcome you, ma'am. We are indeed honored to have you here with us. I owe a special welcome to Reverend Dr. Sister Niranjana Antoni Sami, the Secretary of our college, and beloved Principal Dr. S. Christina Bridget for their minute-to-minute guidance and support for providing encouragement at every point of time. Welcome, sister. I'll also take opportunity to extend my welcome to all the professors, faculties, and scholars of various institutions. With a short note of introduction, once again, I welcome the gathering. A kind note for the participants: kindly pin NR to view the presentation, kindly mute your audio and video of your presentation, and kindly do not put on the presentation mode in between. Queries can be posted at the end in the chat box and will be answered at the end of the sessions. I now hand over the session to Dr. Nirmala Arul Rayan. Madam, the session is yours.
Thanks, Smilan. Thanks, Dr. Sheila, for the warm introduction and for your kind words. Hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
And are you able to see my screen now?
I think it should be in slideshow mode, Mimi.
Yes, ma'am. It is in slideshow mode. Are you able to see it?
Yeah, fine. Yes, now.
Got it.
Yes, Mimi, go ahead.
Okay. If all is good, everyone can see the screen, then I will get started. At the outset, it's both a proud and a humbling moment to come back to my alma mater, Holy Cross College, and to talk about something that will benefit the student community. I see it as a moment to pay back to my alumni, to where I learned and I was formed both academically as well as where my personal values were molded. So with can I request my participants to mute their phones, microphones, please?
Participants, please mute your microphones and please do not go in presentation mode. Yes, Nimi, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. So hopefully through that feedback, you would have caught what I wanted to say. I just wanted to thank Holy Cross College, my teachers, my fellow students, and to the community at large for having made me who I am. I stood on the shoulders of giants, and I'm thankful to Holy Cross College for that. So with that today, I wanted to talk about online resources that's available for transdisciplinary research. So transdisciplinary research could be a buzzword for the moment. So many people do talk about it. So even when I did my undergrad, there were traditional forms of sciences, traditional forms of physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology. That's what we had. Botany, zoology. New terms like microbiology, biochemistry, and applied physics were booming up, but did not pick up back then. This I'm talking about. I'm dating myself, but I'm talking about perhaps a decade back. But so ever since then, there's been a boom of transdisciplinary research where two disciplines are combined and you go into asking new questions that can be only answered by the culmination or the collective efforts of two disciplines. And one thing that I did not know back then, and I hope today, if at all, there is only one takeaway from the talk, it would be this, that the student community actively looks out to and latches on to the free online resources that's available out there to do a very good transdisciplinary research. I keep mentioning students because I catered my presentation for students, but if at all, it still does apply to early career researchers or early career lecturers who are starting out their academic career, combining both research and teaching. Are you able to see my second slide? Just making sure in the beginning.
Yes, Nimi, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. So in this presentation outline, I'm going to talk about 5 things. So what is transdisciplinary research? So, and then why is transdisciplinary research important? I hope to convince you using some successful case studies or examples. And number 3, how do we do transdisciplinary research effectively? If you want to, if you have a calling or if you have an intuition to go ahead and spread your branches out, how do you do that effectively? And then number 4, I want to touch upon what are the benefits. So once you've learned how you can do it, you need to have a vision of what would I gain out of it. So I also want to talk about that. And then in the end, I want to stop with a simple plan, a very simple, effective plan that we can, or each of us can implement or set out to do in order to achieve what we want to do in branching out and doing transdisciplinary research. Okay, so what is transdisciplinary research? I think this audience needs no introduction or going over the basics, but it is just a collection or combination of different fields of research. So if your research question, if you are an undergrad student who's looking for a project, or if you are a master's student who's looking for a master's project, or if you are a PhD or an MPhil student who's looking for a project, what we naively or intuitively try to do is try to look for research topics in our own field. But sometimes we cannot answer the questions that we want to answer by looking only into our field. We need to kind of branch out into other fields, look at the problem from a different angle, and that could give us easy solutions. So that is basically what transdisciplinary research is, which have now become disciplines in both biochemistry, biology and chemistry, biochemistry, and bioinformatics and informatics, bioinformatics. And I keep mentioning biology because I hope you understand my background is in biology. But let's go beyond that. Rehabilitation science, right? Even that's a transdisciplinary research. So what you do, you combine psychology with a little bit of physiotherapy. right? So, which requires a little bit of understanding of physiology. So there's a wide range of disciplines there, and you put it together, and there you have a new discipline that actually makes an impact in the society, right? So some other sciences could be, some other examples could be computational biology. So you see a lot of programs now, if you want to do a PhD, if you go to Bharadasan website or to any other website, university website, you'll see that a combination of math, biology, and computing skills are required for you to address any problems in computational biology, right? So for what would be the example? So you take a biological problem, let's say lung cancer, and then you use math and statistics, and then you use a computational modeling on your data, because the data is so huge, you can't do it on an Excel sheet or on your computer. So a combination of three gives you computational biology. So you kind of go out to address lung cancer or solve lung cancer using big data informatics projects, right? So you're answering biology using other disciplines. The other, most relevant example right now is the pandemic modeling, right? So how do epidemiologists? So epidemiologists are people who study public health diseases. But right now, in order to understand what's going on with COVID, how will COVID spread? How can we stop COVID? And if we come up with a COVID vaccine, how is the COVID vaccine going to be distributed effectively across all countries, across all economic, social status, so that everybody gets it? So even this question itself tells you what all disciplines are involved, right? So it requires economists, it requires virologists, it requires people who study public health, epidemiology. Right? So that's how you do pandemic modeling. And what else? So if you are if you like art, or if you study art, and then you have a penchant for history, and then you pick up business skills, what can you be? You can be a heritage marketer or a heritage manager, right? An antiquarian trader. And another relevant example today, right? So we see a lot of these diagnostic kits that can detect if you have virus, the COVID virus or not. I keep repeating COVID virus because that's relevant today. So if you go to the airports later, we are going to have kits that can tell you the answers within 10 to 15 minutes or within 5 minutes time. So how do they come up with these diagnostic kits? It's not a single virologist or researcher in the lab who comes up with it. The virologist just comes up with a biology underlying the principle. It's a person who deals with systems biology and mechanical engineering and instrumentation sciences that puts together the hardware, right? So it involves two different disciplines to do it. So you might say, and the other examples are like using artificial intelligence in medicine to prescribe medicines or to do surgery, game theory and mechanism design. So you can say, okay, can we not do this by having people, experts from two different fields come together? Yes, that's a good start. But in order to understand each other's language, in order to understand, if I am a biologist and if I describe my data to a mathematician, I should have the skills to explain to him, and he should have the knowledge or the basic foundation to understand what I talk about, right? So if not, it will be like feeling the elephant from different angles. So you'll think that the data is just a trunk, or you'll think the problem is just a tail. So we will not get the whole picture. So in order to get the whole picture of the elephant, it is very, very important and vital that we ourselves become skilled in transdisciplinary research. That is the first starting point. The second start, only then can you effectively collaborate with people across different disciplines. You cannot lean in onto the other people's expertise when you do not have a foundation. And that being said, I also want to point out at the outset, by doing transdisciplinary research, I do not support, nor am I vouching for where you learn a little bit of everything, learn a little bit of biology, learn a little bit of maths, learn a little bit of physics. No, that would not help anyone. You need to decide what is your main core field, have a strong foundation, build the foundation in your core field, and then branch out to the other transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary fields. That is the only formula for success, not a little bit of everything. And so why is TDR important? In this cartoon above there, it's a funny jab that how we, each of us kind of have our own assumptions about our field and we lord it over others, right? Like we say, well, psychologists are most important, and biologists will say, well, psychology is nothing, it's just applied biology. And then chemists will say, there's nothing called biology, it's actually all chemistry. And then physicists will lord over saying, which is chemistry is nothing but physics. So disciplines thrive better together if we don't compete against each other, but instead learn to live together, right? And so why else is TDR important? Why, if you are a student, if you are a master's or an undergrad or a PhD or an MPhil student or an early career researcher, why is TDR important to you? It's important because times have changed, world has changed, the job market has changed. If you look at the top companies that are recruited their job ads, you would see one word or two words that stand out. Ability to effectively branch out, right? Branch out, that's a two word, right? So, or cross-disciplinary. So everybody is looking for cross-disciplinary expertise. So when you look at job ads from Google, you need to be a good programmer. At the same time, you need to be a good systems person, right? By systems, I mean, if you're working with biological sciences, you need to be a good systems biologist, understanding the different systems in biology so that you can code accordingly within the Google projects, right? Microsoft requires both computing technologies as well as a little bit of business, right? Merck, all the pharmacological companies or the pharmaceutical companies, they require you not to know just only the chemistry or strictly biology. They require you to know a little bit of both, right? Plus whole data analysis, which comes back to cloud computing, working with computers, working with large data. And banking sectors, it's not necessary that you should, it's not only necessary that you should learn only, be good at numbers, but you should also be good at not just crunching numbers, but also working with a larger team or addressing innovative problems at a very consumer level, right? So that requires you to know a little bit of economics as well. And so, the other reason why TDR is important is it fills gaps between disciplines, right? So if you were to consider each subject disciplines as boxes, then TDR is the one that fills the distance or the gaps between these separate boxes, right? And the other reason why TDR is important is if you want your research to project into a larger audience, then you definitely have to do transdisciplinary research. So I would take this in my case, in my own example. So the very first research project that I did was to identify some primate-specific sequences in our genome. So I came from a very biology aspect. I wanted to study sequences that were very specific, that were found only in primates, to study primate biology. But then I met up with this mathematics person who said, how would you find it? It's very difficult for you to find it. If you go looking, you've got to, how would you know what is the sequence or what is the DNA, what's a gene, a primate gene that makes a primate unique, right? So then he came up with this idea. This is very interesting. It's a basic problem which has been solved in, say, network biology or network math, right? So I can break up all the primate genes into small networks and then run some algorithms and tell you which genes you should be focusing. So if you have 20,000 genes, I can rank the genes and tell you which genes you should be focusing to do your biology, right? So with a little bit of reading up on that, I was able to catch up. So what I'm trying to get here is if I were stuck in my own biology field within the small well, my audience would only be limited to traditional biologists. But because I branched into applied math and network studies, in this case, computational networking. So the audience became slightly bigger, and then the reach of your research is also big, right? And another reason why it's very, very important and that you should do it is because it's exciting and it's rewarding. It makes you want to get up every day and do what you do, right? So it makes research very, very interesting. So your undergrad projects, your master's project, or your PhD projects would not be a boring deadweight thing. Okay, so let's get started with some. Oops, there's a typo there, but yeah, let's get started with some examples. So I want to walk you through some people who did transdisciplinary research. Let's go way back into not this century, a few centuries back. And if you remember, there was a lady called the lady with a lamp and the lady with the data. I'm pretty sure you guessed when I said lady with a lamp who it is, but did you know that she was also known as the lady with the data? And the graph that I'm showing you here is the graph that she made. So she was a nurse taking care of sick patients during a war. So the graph that she made is a simple graph where she shaded using her color pencils of how many deaths occurred in a particular month. How many soldiers were wounded, how many were hospitalized that she had to take care of, and how many deaths occurred. So this plot is now been famously called as the Coxcom Plot. You can Google it and find out who it is, but I'm going to tell you who it is. It is actually Florence Nightingale, the lady with a lamp. So she was what you would say a mere nurse, but she was not just a mere nurse. She was a pioneering statistician, right? We always know her. I mean, think of Florence Nightingale and we think, oh, she was that kind lady who took care of all the wounded soldiers, and she was a nurse. She was just not a nurse. She was a statistician as well at that time, right? And we have a statistics plot named after her now. It's called the Nightingale Plot, the plot that I'm showing you, or a Coxcom Plot. And moving on, so the next person that we would be interested or that I want to highlight is this famous botanist. Okay? So this famous botanist was also a hardware designer, was also a systems designer, right? So this famous botanist found out how the plant grows, right? And he invented a crescograph. Forget what it is. It's just an instrument that can record even the small growth movements of a plant. So not just that, he was a botanist by training, but he just didn't stick to his own botany research. He also invented the wireless Cosera, which was later took on by Macaroni, and it became what we know as the modern day radio, right? So who was this? This is a little bit closer to home. Florence Nightingale was somewhere there in the Europe. And then now we have Dr. J.C. Bose, right? Dr. Jagdish Chandra Bose. So he was a Nobel Prize winning Indian scientist. He was a botanist and who did transdisciplinary research without knowing it or without naming it so. I want to move on to another example closer to home and closer to me as well. So bringing it closer to home. So there's this person, a zoologist who was trained in endocrinology. She seamlessly branched into, so though she did her training and her studies in animal models, she seamlessly branched into studying plant active metabolites. What do natural plant compounds do? And for that research, she had to do statistics. And at a middle age, she picked up statistics skills and she went for statistics classes. And then she envisioned the need for merging biology and technology. And she was one of the persons who conceived the idea of having biotechnology in Holy Cross College, one of the many who came up with the idea. And she secured the first prestigious grant for in silico modeling and bioinformatics, the first one in Tamil Nadu, and the first women's college in India to do that way back in early 2000s. And this is none other than your very own Dr. Daisy Leslie, who was college Trichy from 1980 to 2014. So we have many luminous examples right from far away to closer to home, and saying that transdisciplinary research is something that we can do, and it's something that has been done, and it's something that's very interesting, right? So with that, let's get to how do we do transdisciplinary research effectively, right? 3 things. 1, pick it up from the leaders in the field. Watch and learn, right? Number 2, networking. About the first 2 points, picking it up from the leaders in the world and networking, I'll touch upon it later towards the end. So now let's dive right away into the free online resources available. Right. So the first resource that I would like to talk about or to tell you about is edX. So edX is like a typical going to a university, but it's online, right? So any course, if you can't, like we can be sitting down here in Trichy and we can have access to a UC Berkeley class or a Harvard class or a class that's going on in Stanford University, right? So Stanford professors or Harvard professors record their classes and they put it up for free at edX, right? So there's about 2,500 online courses across 140 institutions, right? So you see some of the professors who contribute to this. So I would encourage each and every one of you to go check it out. It's online. At this age, all of us have access to computers. All of us have access to internet. So it's so much easy. You don't have to. Gone are the days when you have to sit down and brood. If only I had the means and the resources, I would have liked to go to the US to do an education. There's no need for that anymore, right? Right within the cozy corners of your home, you can set up a class which goes on in any university of your liking and in any field, right? And most of these online portals actually help you bridge a lot of the transdisciplinary research. So they offer very novel and innovative programs which combines two disciplines together, right? So you don't have to look it up for traditional courses. Go look up what are the transdisciplinary courses that they offer. And the majority of these, the website says it offers 2,500 online courses. I can vouch you that at least 1,000 of the courses are transdisciplinary courses. All you have to do is drop down the menu, check for transdisciplinary courses in your own field and sign up for it. Then the next one is Cosera. So Cosera is a massive library of video recordings of people who come on to teach. So there is a prescribed syllabus. There's a prescribed test after every week. So that also has a lot of transdisciplinary research. Like they teach you bioinformatics, they teach you biostatistics, they even teach you how to build things, mechanical engineering for biology or for any of the disciplines that you are interested in. The other interesting one is on MIT OpenCourseware. So I know I keep talking about the science, but there's quite a lot of how you can bridge literature and science, arts and science as well. So one of the favorite courses that I have, that I did on MIT OpenCourseware was studying about how effectively to use your English skills in your own field. For example, in biology, when we present something, right, we always use a lot of jargons, which only we would understand. Other non-biologists would not understand. But this course, the science communication course, kind of distills it for you, how you can use layman's terms, right? So it's a very simple 1-week course. So you've got many courses like this. There's another interesting course that caught my attention, which was poetry and science. Right, so it looks into how English poetry and science have co-lived together, and how many of the scientists are have actually been poets, and they've written poems describing their science. It's pretty cool, and if you do have time, do Google it up. It's called Poetry and Science. And the other website is Allison. So Allison also has a lot of courses in humanities, in language, in business, in math, in marketing. So marketing skills are something that I feel that every discipline has to pick up. Because if you cannot sell your research, if you cannot sell your ideas are worth nothing, right? So even though I could be a bright science student, but if I cannot sell my idea or my research idea forward, I would fail. So marketing is something that as a part of transdisciplinary research, we can pick it up. The other resources are Microsoft Virtual Academy. So Microsoft Virtual Academy offers a lot of computer programming courses, and it also offers a lot of resources for how you can do any research that you want to do, any discipline that you want to do on an online ecosystem, right? So that's Microsoft Virtual Academy. Code Academy teaches you how to code, how to do programming, coding. So you don't have to know any knowledge in C or C++ or R or Python. You just go in naively, and there are courses that will teach you how to code. And you can learn to code for your own fields. Like, for example, if you are a teacher and if you probably want to do some coding for your students to teach very simple, let's say, spread of right now, the spread of the the nCoV-19 virus, right? So how do you do it? So it gives you pretty cool graphs to show or convey the point that you are trying to convey. So, and that can be done at Code Academy. Code Academy has a lot of R courses. R is a programming language which can be picked up by anyone without any basic knowledge of programming. MOSE is another online research that offers a lot of transdisciplinary research subjects, HubSpot Academy. And right now it's become a fashion that most of us have subscribed to iTunes or may have iPhones. So iTunes University is also a good place where there's a lot of transdisciplinary research going on. Duolingo is another way where you can broaden your transdisciplinary research because it offers you how you can learn new languages. So that also effectively helps you if you're going to do transdisciplinary research. Will definitely take you places, as in will take you outside your comfort zones, outside your ecosystem, outside your country, outside your district. So Duolingo has actually helped me in my transdisciplinary research in an indirect way by helping me pick up foreign languages. Right. So what are the benefits of transdisciplinary research? I might be running out of time, so let me go through this quickly. So we become more effective at learning things. We have increased cognitive gains. So we become more creative if you pick up transdisciplinary research, and problem-solving capacity increases. The mood or the flavor of the hour right now is innovation and startup culture. There's so many innovation and startups that are coming up in India. And if you look at the startups, it is never a startup that has founders from one particular field. It is always startups whose founders have had exposure to two different fields. They would have been a IT consultant now who branched over into a completely different field, right? Say NGO system, right? And they might be, so for another example is, I know of a biologist who has a very famous startup right now, which sells mock seafood or cultured seafood, right? Cell culture based seafood. And it is a booming industry right now. So all that she took was how to do cell culture from a tissue culture lab in the biology. And then she went on into adding a lot of business skills to her CV, and then boom, a startup was started, right? And the transdisciplinary research also heavily impacts public health and also public policies. So your CV actually looks good if you are looking for public policy related jobs, if you have transdisciplinary research. And transdisciplinary research booms economic impact as well. And it opens doors for you to be better at new learning paradigms. So you will be creating a new learning cosmos actually by doing transdisciplinary research. And here's how you can start simple methods, simple ways, or simple elementary steps for a new beginner. If you feel like all I have known right now is just my undergrad in commerce, how do I do transdisciplinary research? Is start small. First, work on your foundation, build a strong foundation in your discipline. Pick people whom you think are interesting, or pick people whom you think are their disciplines. Watch and learn from them. Talk to them. Ask them if they can be your mentors. Ask them if they can teach what they have learned over a cup of coffee. Watch and learn, right? And the number three is pick a problem that you think you want to solve, right? So pick that particular problem. So for example, Elon Musk, right? So right now, Elon Musk is so famous with all his innovations and with Tesla. But, you know, he started small with building things, building cars, fixing broken toys. That's how he started. That's the interest that he had. But then he later branched out into learning about space science, learning about clean energy, and then picked up those skills and then worked with people who have better skills in that. And then now he is a multi-billion-dollar industry. He owns a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So pick a problem that needs solving. Find the question that you want to solve. So for Elon Musk, it was, I want to create clean energy, or that's debatable, but still that was his problem that he picked on, right? Pick up the needed skills. So sign up for classes, go online, educate yourself. Then the next would be to lean in. So identify groups or networks. So within your classmates, form groups within your, in the college is a perfect ecosystem for you to do transdisciplinary research. So back when we studied, we did not have any transdisciplinary subjects, but our teachers were very out of the box thinking. I mean, our teachers thought out of the box and let us go take credit classes beyond class hours. So our college would end at 1:30 and our teachers would say after 1:30, go to the evening college, pick any class that you want to do and audit it. You won't be writing exams. You won't be doing getting a degree in that, but at least you learn. You'll hear what the teacher is teaching. You'll hear what the students are discussing, and then you'll pick up skills. So that's how I picked up a basic math and basic physics as well. Plus, having a group of students helps, right? You can have fun, but beyond all the fun, at some point, if you have one student from each department, let's say one from chemistry, one from mathematics, one from computer science, and one from rehab, just brainstorm ideas, thinking like, what do you think the world needs? What do you think we need to fix right now? And then between the 5 of you, you will be able to build a transdisciplinary ecosystem there. You'll be teaching each other, you'll be learning from each other, and perhaps you will be working on a project that actually keeps you excited. And exploit social media. The next one is look up for what people are looking for, job opportunities in LinkedIn, and see if you are well suited for that. Tailor your CV, build up your CV based on that. And Twitter. People use Twitter to spread hate. In the contrary, you can use it, you can give it a positive spin and use Twitter to build your own community network. You can read what scientists, so there are lots of scientists who tweet about science, who tweet about math, or lots of subject specialists who tweet about their own subjects. You can follow them and see what is going on in the field. Oh, what have they discovered today? What have they learned today? Or what are they saying is a big problem today? So how can I work towards answering that problem, right? And with the death of TikTok in India, you can come up with, you can use other social media websites to say, perhaps say, I don't know what's going to replace TikTok in India, but maybe YouTube or some other small video portals where you can upload videos of you explaining a concept in a very simple term, right? So that's a most basic way how you can branch out into transdisciplines. First, see if you can explain your own field in a very layman terms, in a very fun way, and make it very exciting for others. Very soon, you'll be forming friends and you can learn off each other, and your knowledge will grow. So I think with this, I would like to stop. And if there are any questions, would like to take those questions. I apologize if I had kept it heavily watered down. My intent was to address the students and instill the interest in them to get into transdisciplinary research. But if you have any heavy, meaty questions, I am up for taking it up right now. Thank you.
Yes, Smiling. Smiling.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You can just check whether there are any questions.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, ma'am, it was a delightful session. We'll move on to the Q&A session now. Participants can post your queries in the chat box. Right now we have more appreciated words like thank you, wonderful session and all.
There's one by Kalpana Singh. She
had said that some open source software for thermodynamics and kinetic interactions between drugs and biomedicine.
Biomembrane.
Yeah, biomembrane, sorry.
She wants
to repeat that, please. Can you repeat that, please?
She says some open source softwares for thermodynamics and kinetic interactions between drugs and biomembrane.
She wants you to suggest some open source softwares.
Got it. Okay. That's very specific, thermodynamics and biomembranes. I could say look into bioengineering courses in any of edX or Cosera, so they would address that. But if you are looking for a database where you can glean material or information, there's quite a lot of there's a field in nano engineering or nanotechnology called biomaterials. It's material research in biology. So you can actually go to those databases. I don't remember the names of those because I don't use it, but there are lots of biomaterial databases that you can download the data and take a look. That's if you want the data. If you want courses to do, then go sign up for bioengineering courses.
Okay, ma'am. The other question is, you mentioned some free online resources, whether we can get certificates after completion of courses.
Yeah. So the deal with the free online courses is that you will be part of, you will have access to the video lectures, you will have access to the worksheets and the quizzes that go on weekly. You will have to submit them, they will be reviewed. But if you want a certificate, there will be a completion. So in your CV, you can add it, or in your LinkedIn page, you can add it that you've completed a free online course. But if you want a physical certificate to be mailed to you, that involves paying money. So I think that's about 1,000 rupees, 1,000 to 2,000 rupees for Cosera. So it depends on each course. So if you want a physical certificate, you need to pay a little bit of money. But if you don't want a physical certificate, and if adding it into your LinkedIn page or into your CV is good enough, then just go for the free courses.
Okay. How to manage transdisciplinary research?
Okay, I'm assuming this question that you are saying comes from a point of you are from a scenario where you are already into transdisciplinary research, and your question is, how do I manage the problems that come with transdisciplinary research? Right, so first is a large overdose of humility, I think, to first accept that in transdisciplinary research, we will never know anything fully. So with that humility, be confident in your own specialty field, in your own core specialty. So that's number one. Develop the confidence or learn so much more that you are confident in your own core, specialty. And then be humble that you don't know anything about others. So always be open to learning and have a good network around you. So have people whom you can rely on to get that information and who will complement your skill sets.
The other question from Sangeeta Agarwal is, it's difficult to find groups who would be interested to collaborate. We had approached a few, did not work out. Can you suggest some?
Okay. I know I'm going to sound a little bit too preachy and teaching. Bear with me. Straight answer is keep trying. So if one group says no, it doesn't mean that the whole world is saying no, right? There are lots of fishes in the sea. So go out there, cast your net, keep trying. If one group says no, go to another group. Modify your pitch. Maybe the way, learn from your mistakes, right? Or even if it's not a mistake, learn from your past. Maybe the way you approached the first time, the way you pitched your idea the first time wasn't convincing enough for the other person to take it on. So make your research or your question or your proposal super interesting and super sensational that the other person cannot say no, right? And if you think that I don't want to go to another person, I want this particular person to say yes to my transdisciplinary research, then keep trying again, right? So you don't have to do it within a structure. You can just write to them and say, can I meet you up for coffee? Okay, that isn't allowed right now in COVID times, but you can always say, can I just have a Zoom session with you for 30 minutes whenever you're free, just to, bounce off ideas of each other. If you and tell them what they will get to learn from it, right? Or what their advantage is. You can be as simple as you are the leader in the field and I don't know anything, so I need to learn from you. Can I do that? Most people will not say no to such things unless they have a very strong reason to. In that case, move on to others.
The next question is, what's the impact of personal perspective in reproducing transdisciplinary research? Can I repeat the question, ma'am?
I heard the question, Turin. I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
what the context is. I don't understand what it means. Could you explain that to me, Smilan, please?
She had asked, like, what's the impact of personal perspective in reproducing the transdisciplinary research?
Carla, if you can unmute your mic and ask that question yourself. Carla?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, you can unmute your
hi.
mic and you can ask that question yourself.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, like, when there is a successful research that has been conducted through the transdisciplinary approach, if I would like to reproduce it with a smaller sample, will the results be impacted if mine or my team's personal perspective plays a role in it? Like the way how I see it, like the way how each person from the different discipline looks at it, will it affect the result?
Got it. I will answer your question. Will your personal perspective definitely plays a big role. So if a big research has already been completed and you are trying to reproduce the same results, the first thing to do would be to get the detailed methods from them, right? How they did it, the nitty-gritty details of how that research was carried out, so you can use the same parameters to repeat it within your group, right? And by doing that, you are actually leaning into the strength of that transdisciplinary team. Though you may not have all the transdisciplinary expertise, you're just taking the protocol from somebody else and implementing it here. So that should solve most of the problems. And then number two, personal perspective. Yes. Personal perspective plays a role. If you think that the other person is, other discipline isn't as important as you, then as yours, then of course you will have a heavy bias towards your own discipline. And so while doing transdisciplinary research, the best personal perspective to have is, we are in this together, right? It is important. Every angle or every piece of the puzzle is important to only get the answer and to solve the big puzzle. So they are like small chips, small pieces in a puzzle, which put together, then only then you get the final answer. So I don't have any doubts, Carla, that you will have the wrong personal perspective to do any interdisciplinary research. For the others, Carla is my batchmate in while we were doing undergrad. So zoology departments and rehabilitation science department, we have done some good fine arts programs collaboratively. So and I believe you had the right perspective. You did not ridicule the zoology department back then. So yeah, I don't have any doubts on that.
Thank you so much, Nimi. Thank you.
The next question is, ma'am, when we do transdisciplinary research, what extent of support we could expect from our disciplinary professionals in terms of data collection and problem solving? Can you share your experience?
Yeah, so you have to, whenever you do transdisciplinary research, you have to keep going back to the drawing board. What do I mean by a drawing board, right? So in the drawing board, you will be writing, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, but I'm hoping to have expertise here, and this is the problem that I'm going to get, right? So when you do data collection from a field that is not your own, you have to have a skeletal framework in hand, right? When you do data collection in your own field, it is very easy for you. It comes intuitively for you because you know how to handle it. But if it's in a different field, sit down with the experts and tell them, hey, I'm going to do a data collection in your field. What are the good practices that I should follow? So go to the drawing board, draw up a good framework, a skeletal framework, and then work from that skeletal framework. Work on that skeletal framework. Do it religiously, step by step. In that case, you would not be having any problems. Did I answer that question, or did I leave it?
Yeah, I think that's fine, Nimi. Can we take one more question and close, Smiley?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. The question is, can we find any stream knowledge from online resources?
Is it stream knowledge?
Yeah. The question is from Dr. Priyanka. She had asked, can we find any stream knowledge from online resources?
Dr. Priyanka, it would be great if you can explain to me what is stream knowledge. I'm sorry, I'm a little lost there.
Dr. Priyanka, can you unmute your audio and ask that question yourself? Dr. Priyanka Pandey, are you there? Okay, I think we will close then since she's not there.
Okay, ma'am.
Smiley, you can go to the conclusion.
Yeah. Okay, ma'am. Okay. Oh, the first and foremost, I thank the Almighty for providing this opportunity. I, on behalf of Center for Research and Publication, Holy Cross College, Trichy, extend my deepest sense of appreciation and thanks to the Honorable Speaker, Dr. Nirmala Arul Rayan, for accepting our invitation, sharing the inspirational lecture with us, and explain the topic exemplarily. Her rich proficiency, great achievement, and intellectual thoughts and publications would be an inspiration for young faculties and scholars. I must mention a heartfelt thanks for answering all the queries patiently raised after and during the session. Thank you, ma'am. I owe my special gratitude to all the distinguished professors, faculties, and researchers of various institutions for joining us. Thank you once again. Participants, kindly stay back for the next session. Now, I hand over the session to Dr. Bonita, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Holy Cross College. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Smiley.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thanks to Dr. Sheila, to Dr. Smilan, to Dr. Rajalakshmi. And it was, thanks for having me. It was an honor. And thanks. I'm happy to have seen Carla and Winnie here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nimi, for your effort, your time. Thanks so much for being with us. We cherish every moment of your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Smilan, for that beautiful moderation.
Thank you so much.
We now move to our next session. We have a very experienced professional across the seas, Dr. Richard Rose from the University of Northampton. This session will be moderated by Dr. Bonita, Assistant Professor, Department of History. Over to Dr. Bonita and Dr. Richard.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good morning and welcome to the second session of the UGC Stride FDP Webinar Series 3 for the faculty, research scholars, students, and on capacity building of young talent in transdisciplinary research for a sustainable development of society, conducted by the Center of Research and Publications of the Holy Cross College, Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu. I am Dr. Bonita Lynette Cooper, Assistant of History, Holy Cross College, who will be the moderator of this session. Research is creative work undertaken on a systematic basis in order to increase the stock of knowledge, including knowledge of humanity, culture, society, and the use of this stock of knowledge to devise new applications. Researching, quotes, vulnerable population or groups at risk is the type of research where individuals who are comparatively or entirely inept of defending their own well-being. Vulnerability is a central concept in protecting human subjects excluded in a research setting.
Before I introduce the speaker, a few housekeeping instructions. The sessions of the FDP webinar series is being recorded. You can watch it on YouTube at HCC Flamingo. I welcome you to revisit the content yourself. I invite your questions for the speaker. Please type them into the chat box at the end of the session. Kindly mute your audio and switch off your video, and do not share your screen and pin the presentation of the resource person in the name of Richard Rose. Thank you. Without further ado, it's time to introduce the resource person of this session, who is Professor Emeritus Richard Rose. A short exordium of the resource person. Professor Richard Rose is a researcher, writer, and a child rights advocate. He currently holds a post as Professor Emeritus in Inclusive Education at the University of Northampton, UK, and provides mentoring in research for novice researchers in UK, India, and Cambodia. He conducted research in many countries, including Sierra Leone, Hong Kong, Malta, Bhutan, and Georgia. Professor Richard previously held posts as teacher, head teacher and education inspector in 4 English education authorities, that is Derbyshire, Somerset, Norfolk, and Northamptonshire. He held the Marden Fellowship as visiting professor at the Education University, Hong Kong. As a researcher, Professor has held major investigations on behalf of a number of international non-governmental organizations, including UNICEF and Site Savers, national governments, research councils, and trusts. He was the principal investigator on the Project IRIS, Inclusive Research in Irish Schools, a 4-year longitudinal study into provision of children with special education needs in Ireland, funded by the National Council of Special Education. His current research projects are being undertaken in India and in Cambodia. Professor Richard has authored more than 100 academic publications related to education and child rights, and has delivered keynote addresses at international conferences in many parts of the world. His non-academic writing include fiction, non-fiction, poetry, and drama, which has been published in numerous literary magazines. He participates regularly in performances of reading as a part of Northampton's annual Bloomsday event in the famous Homer's Iliad. I take this opportunity to welcome you, sir, and looking forward in acquiring knowledge from your presentation. I also welcome the Secretary of our college, Reverend Dr. Sister Niranjan Anthony-Sami, and our beloved Principal, Reverend Dr. Sister Christina Bridget. Welcome, sisters. Finally, I welcome all the participants present here on this virtual platform. I hand over this virtual floor to Professor Richard Rose. Sir, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the welcome, and good morning, everybody. I'll put up my presentation so that we can get straight into the task today. Just check here. Okay, can people see the presentation?
Not as yet, sir.
Not yet.
Oh. Okay, let's try again. Still no good?
Not yet, sir.
Not yet. Present now, and then you click your presentation and then say share.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. Okay, let's try again.
Yeah.
Present now. It doesn't seem to want to share.
If you can send your PPT to my mail, maybe we could do that.
Okay, let's do that.
Juliet?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
I sent the PPT to you, Juliet.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Is that the same PPT that you sent me on the 15th July?
It is.
It is?
It is, yes. I'm just sending it again, yeah.
Yeah. If you have modified it, you can send it again, or else I already have your PPT with me.
Okay, it's not been modified, so do use that one then.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay. Ah, is it working now?
No.
Not yet, sir.
The message I have says it's being shared with everyone, so.
It is visible, ma'am.
Is it?
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
sir. It's
Now
visible,
it
sir.
is. Now it is.
Ah, right. Okay, let's start in that case.
Thank you. That's fine.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. Today's presentation is inevitably going to just touch upon a subject which I think is extremely important. All of us who are involved in research into the lives of other people hold a huge responsibility. What in this country we would normally refer to as a duty of care. And this duty of care increases when we're working with people who might be described in any way as vulnerable. So in today's session, what I'm going to try and do is think about who these vulnerable and marginalized people might be. And I will explain the terminology that I'm using very early on, because I think we need to share a common language when we're thinking about groups who we describe in this manner. Inevitably, the kind of research that I'm interested in, which is research into people with disabilities, those living in poverty, those from marginalized communities in general, we have to consider the ethical implications of doing research in this field. And then what I would do is provide an example from research to indicate some of the principles and practices that we need to apply when working in this particular field. Now, as I say, this is a brief session, and many of the things that I'm going to say need a lot more thought and elaboration. And hopefully, those of you who are working in this area and come into contact on a regular basis with people who we might describe as vulnerable will have an opportunity to think further on some of the important issues that I'm trying to raise in this session. So let's think about this term vulnerability. There has been a tendency to think of people being vulnerable who are in some ways at the lower end of our society. What I mean by that is people who we instantly recognize as being in some way in danger or in some way defined by an inability to cope in the kind of society that we've created. But actually, as human beings, we're all vulnerable. Our vulnerability changes from time to time. For instance, if we're placed in a situation in which we're unfamiliar, then our vulnerability increases. So, for example, many of us will have experienced being in a different culture, maybe where there's a different language. We don't have that language and we're unfamiliar with the culture. Our vulnerability inevitably increases. We feel that we are in some way slightly different from everything that is going on around us. And we're very dependent in those circumstances upon other people. So, for example, I can remember being in Xinjiang province in China, and I speak no Chinese language at all. And I was in an area where all the signs around me, all the notices were in Chinese, and I was lost. And I spent quite a lot of time trying to find somebody who could give me direction and to help me. Now, I like to think that I'm a fairly independent person and a fairly educated person. But actually, the example I've just given you shows that when we're taken out of a situation of comfort, we immediately become vulnerable. And this is important for all of us because human vulnerability is, as it says here, a notion of personal integrity. Personal integrity relates to the confidence we have to cope in the society in which we live and exist. Once that integrity is challenged, we become more vulnerable. It's obviously, as it says, an inescapable dimension of human life. We all from time to time feel insecure. We all feel that we're maybe out of what we would call our comfort zone. We're not actually as confident as we might normally be. And this is an important aspect of being a human being. And many of us have learned to see these circumstances as maybe a learning opportunity. If, for instance, I came to live full-time in India, I would probably make more effort to learn an Indian language because it would increase my ability to cope in the society that I'm in. And I would see that as a learning opportunity. But actually, we know that all of us at some times are more likely to become vulnerable. An obvious example, which perhaps applies to all of us to some extent, is as we get older, our vulnerability may increase. We think obviously of children as being vulnerable, and most of my work has been with children. And we know that children, particularly very young children, are highly dependent upon adults for all of their basic needs. Their physical needs, social needs, emotional needs are something which we readily accept is part of childhood, that vulnerability and needing our protection. But of course, many of us, if we get to be old, will become vulnerable again. People lose physical ability. Sometimes they lose intellectual ability. They certainly often lose their sensory abilities. Their hearing may become impaired or their vision. So we shouldn't look at vulnerability as something which is other than ourselves. Vulnerability is a normal state of humanity. But of course, we know that there are particular challenges for some members of our population. So we know that, for instance, many of us will have those kind of conditions I've just described to you, which may be what we would call temporary disabilities or temporary vulnerabilities. We know that many people will experience, for instance, in their life, a period of maybe illness or injury following an accident when their abilities are less than they are normally. So a simple thing like breaking your arm might make you very vulnerable for a period of time when you can no longer drive or write or maybe even feed yourself. But these are often temporary And we learn from those experiences what it is to be vulnerable and what it is to become dependent. But then the kind of vulnerability I'm interested in today, from the perspective of being a researcher, are those that are created vulnerabilities within our societies. So we know that there are people who are made vulnerable by political and environmental factors, and factors such as economy, power relationships, or natural disaster. So we know, for example, that within all of our societies, mine as much as in India, there are people who are discriminated against in terms maybe of their class, their social status in society, their caste, in some cases maybe their religion, and who are looked upon by many people in society as being of less stability and therefore more vulnerable than most of us. This is an important factor here because situations do shift and change. And we know that people who feel stable at one time can very soon feel vulnerable. We have a fine example of that right across the world at the moment. COVID-19 has created a situation of vulnerability and instability for people who previously may not have experienced this situation. So I want us to think about us as researchers and our role and this important relationship that exists between the researcher and what I'm going to describe as the researched, those who are in possession of the knowledge that as researchers we hope to gain. And this is a very complex relationship. And the way that we behave as researchers dictates how effective we are as researchers in the area of what I would call social justice and respectful to the communities in which we work. So let's think about ourselves as researchers. The minute we give somebody this title, researcher, they're generally perceived as an expert. And those of us who work in the social sciences, those of us who are perhaps working in ethnographic methods at times, we are perceived as an expert in understanding the lives of others. I would suggest to you that there's a limit to our expertise there. And actually, what we are trying to do is to gain an understanding of the lives of others, but we do so through a lens which is based upon our own experience. And that in itself can be a problem for us. It can be a problem in terms of the power relationship. The researcher is in a very powerful position. I say they're in a powerful position because, generally speaking, when we conduct research, and particularly when we conduct research on a large scale, which is being funded, we're in a position of power. We are in a position of power over the lives of other people. What we say is listened to. What we publish is hopefully read by others and can be influential. The kind of research that we do may, for instance, shape public policy. And therefore, we're in positions of considerable power as researchers. Now, some of you would argue the research collects the data, it's the policymakers and the politicians who put things into place and therefore use that information. They're the people in positions of power. And that's true. But that's why it's so beholding on us to give them information that is not just accurate, but is respectful of the people we're investigating. And the other thing about the researcher is, of course, often the kind of research that many of us are involved in, we have a very different lifestyle and education from those who we are actually researching. So I'll give you an example from my own experience. I'm currently involved in research in Telangana state in India. working in villages with families who have children with disabilities. My experience of disability has been as a teacher, as a researcher, as an activist, but I've never actually lived the kind of life that these people have. I've never lived in an impoverished village, totally dependent on daily wage earning, where there's no school for my child, where my diet is limited, where health support and care is also limited. I'm in a position where my lifestyle, my education, my life experience is very different from those whom I'm researching. And therefore, I need to try to understand the position that these people take and to be respectful of the knowledge and the experience that they have, and not to impose my own experiences and beliefs upon them. The researcher is also seeking knowledge from data, and that data doesn't belong to the researcher. When we collect data, it is on loan to us as the property of the people that we investigate. The data comes from the life experiences of those with whom we work. And therefore, when we collect that data, we need to acknowledge that the data has been given to us in good faith, hopefully through informed consent, hopefully in a respectful manner. Because if we turn now to the column of the researched are the possessors of data. And that data is something that they don't see in the terms that we do. Their knowledge, their data is often more understood and more valued by others, including the researcher. We wish to extract that data from the field when we conduct our field work. And therefore, we need to actually recognize that what we are doing is we're asking people to give up something which is personal to them. And we need to make sure that when we do this, we're being as inintrusive as we can. We need to make sure that we leave people feeling that they have been valued and respected in this process. These people often lack any power or control to alter their own situation. So I'll go back to the example in Telangana. The people that I've been working with there who have children with disabilities have no schools for their children to attend. There are local Zilla Parishad schools, there are local government facilities, but they are not taking children with disabilities, certainly not those who have the most extreme disabilities. The people who are parenting these children feel vulnerable. They are vulnerable. They have no power to control or alter their own situation. They will look to the researcher as somebody who has influence, even if our influence is in reality quite limited. But those of us who do this kind of research do it because we want to improve the lives of those with whom we work. And we need to be very careful not to make promises we can't keep. We need to be aware that often the researched will look to the researcher as somebody who can improve their lives. And that's not always necessarily true. So there is a difficulty with this relationship there. We need to be honest. We need to be straightforward with the people with whom we work. And the researcher is very dependent, or the researched rather, the people researching is very dependent on the behavior and actions of persons who are in positions of power. They have very little control over their lives. They are highly dependent. And therefore, these are vulnerable people. Whoever we collect data from is really under the power of the researcher, and we need to be very aware of that. So let's just think about this notion of the research that we do and how we collect the data that we need. I'm going to go away from the notion of a vulnerable person to a vulnerable group. It's usually, as it says here, synonymous with groups at risk. A group is vulnerable because there is reason to suspect that the individuals in the group have difficulty giving free and informed consent to being the subjects of research. Now, what consent and their willingness to be part of a research project may often be very complex. They may lack the understanding, the ability to actually give things like consent. I don't want to get into talking about gaining assent and all these issues. We don't have time now, but gaining informed consent can be very difficult from people of this nature. Now, obviously, there are people who act in loco parentis. There are people in care positions who can help with this. But at the end of the day, they are not the vulnerable themselves. They are acting on behalf of them. Vulnerable groups may be groups who feel, for instance, under political or social distress, people in minorities. So, for example, one of my PhD students doing research in Maharashtra state a few years ago was working with a tribal community. The tribal community had a lot of bad experiences with people in positions of authority and were very reluctant at first to be involved in giving their data through interviews or discussing things with a researcher because they were vulnerable. This is a group that is vulnerable, and therefore we need to understand something of that group culture and to try and understand the perspective that they're giving. We need, for instance, never to apportion blame. The researcher is responsible for the actions of the research and must find ways of making the people we work with comfortable in that situation. It's very interesting, actually, that if we look at the term vulnerable, it comes from a Latin root, vulnus, which means wound. These were originally regarded as wounded people, not wounded necessarily physically, but wounded by society. And many of the people who I'm concerned with have been wounded by society groups. They have been wounded by the society discriminated groups. They have been wounded by the society in which they live. So let's move on to this notion of respectful research. I'm going to suggest to you that we need to look at a four-stage approach to research if we want to be completely respectful of the people that we work with. So I'm going to go through each one of these stages in a little bit of detail. And then what I'll do at the end of my presentation is give you an example from an actual project that I led, which shows how we tried to deal our preparation. The period before any of the field work is conducted, before a team actually has made contact and gone into the field to see anybody involved in the research. The second stage is the field work. And the field work I would describe as the period when we develop our instruments and we do pilot testing. We do pilot studies of our instruments. So we have to do that to some extent in the field. And the period when we're collecting data from individuals or from groups. And the period at which we are actually engaged in correspondence, in discussion, in relationship with the groups we're looking at. And I'm particularly interested in this notion of people who are vulnerable. Then there's the period of analysis, where we actually are looking at the data that we've collected. We're perhaps coding, we're looking at triangulating our data, and we're looking at interpreting what we found out. And then there's a final stage, which is reporting, which we all obviously have to do. This is an area that concerns me greatly, actually. We're all, as academics, those of you who are working in universities will know that we're under tremendous pressure to publish our findings in high-rated academic journals. And that's good. Our work should be peer-reviewed. and I respect that totally. But actually, the pressure that comes from that system often leads to some researchers making shortcuts in this process that I'm going to describe. So I'm going to go through the 4 stages one at a time. Let's think about respectful preparation. The first thing I think we need to consider is the motivation of the research. Now, I said research funders here. Some of you may be conducting studies for a PhD or just personal research. The motivation issue still applies. Why is it that people want this research done? Is it because, for instance, they want us to prove something? I'll give you an example of this. Often in my field, which has been, as I say, working with marginalized groups, people will come and they will say, we've developed this system for working with children with disabilities, and we want you to prove that it works. Research isn't about that. Research is about questioning. It's about integrity. And we have to be able to say to these people, I can investigate, I can evaluate what you've developed, but at the end of the day, if I show that what you've developed doesn't work, I'm going to have to say so. This is a really important factor, it seems to me. And it's very tempting in some cases when you're looking for research, particularly if you're a young researcher starting out on your career, to just grab any opportunity that comes. But we need to be cautious. We need to avoid getting into the pitfall of conducting research on the behalf of people who want us to come up with particular results. Now, I know that this is politically charged, and it's as politically charged in India as it is in the UK and other places that I've researched. But we need to be aware that our responsibility is to be fair and honest and transparent in everything that we do. The motivation of research funders has obviously been debated for many, many years. Many of us, for instance, would never accept financing from various organizations, for instance, that are involved in the arms trade or the tobacco industry have been very controversial in this country. Respectful preparation also means that we go out of our way to make sure that the subjects of research will be comfortable with the methods of investigation. This is really important. Many of us actually think about the methodologies which are best to collect the data that we want. And that's a natural process. We need instruments, we need to develop instruments that are appropriate to need. But I would urge you to be very cautious in making sure that the people who you're collecting data from are comfortable with what you want to do. For instance, face-to-face interviews can be very uncomfortable for people in certain communities. They can challenge the individual who is not used to communicating with somebody in a position of authority, for instance. Obvious things like the use of surveys. Large-scale surveys can provide us with good, quantifiable data and can be extremely valuable to the researcher. But are we convinced that the people who are answering these surveys know how to answer a survey? I've even known a situation, and I've known this in India with a colleague of mine who did research in a fishing community, people being sent paper-based surveys who have no literacy skills. We need to be very careful to make sure that our subjects are comfortable. So, for example, the research that I have been doing in Telangana, we asked people if they would be comfortable with being interviewed, be comfortable with being part of a focus group, and explain what those things involved. And where necessary, for example, I can recall interviewing women for parts of this research who needed a chaperone with them in order to be interviewed for religious reasons, and that's fine. But we need to prepare and make sure that all of this is done before we ever go into the field. We need to be transparent about our beliefs and the philosophy of the researchers. None of us are neutral. We all have belief systems. We all have a particular philosophy and understanding of the world. So my motivations for doing the research are to improve the lives of other people. But I have various beliefs that I know some people working in the same field would not hold. For example, I believe that every child has a right to be educated alongside their peers, regardless of their needs or abilities. I have a belief, I believe that children should not be segregated within schools because of their religious beliefs, for instance. And this can be challenging. The research I did in Ireland, for instance, where the majority of children come from Roman Catholic families, there are people there who believe strongly that Roman Catholic children should be educated separately from those of a Protestant background. I don't believe that. I need to be clear about making that apparent to the people I'm working with. They need to know what my beliefs are. Because what I don't want them to do is to say, I'm skewing the data by hiding my opinions and my beliefs. We need to be honest. And we need to make sure when we conduct research that we have a team that's properly skilled and experienced. So, for example, the work that I've done in other countries, in Cambodia, in India, in China, and Malaysia, for instance, needs to be a team which is made up from local people as well as people from outside. I can understand that in some circumstances, people who are funding research want somebody from outside who is not carrying, if you like, any of the baggage around that local people may have. But we need to actually make sure that we have people who are properly skilled and experienced. When I'm working in Telangana, I do not speak Telugu. I need researchers with me who are fluent in Telugu in order to be able to do that work. We need to make sure that we are respectful and not asserting our own systems on other people. So let's go to the field work then. What does respectful field work look like? When we develop our instruments, we need to think about the impacts that we have upon the subjects of our research. Students sometimes say to me, I've developed an interview schedule and I've got 40 questions. My first question would be, well, you're expecting an awful lot of the people you're interviewing. Have they got the time to sit with you and answer 40 questions? Let's be realistic about these people's lives. Let's try and be minimal in the disruption that we cause to people. So, for example, if I want to interview teachers, I know that I can't just arrive at a school and expect them to be available to be interviewed. Teachers are busy people. Teachers have courses to take, they have meetings to attend, and they have a life outside of school as well. The respectful researcher actually negotiates over when people are available, and they discuss with them what is going to be the least disruptive time to conduct their research. Similarly, if I'm conducting observation as part of an ethnographic study, I'm aware that the minutes that I'm in the field, I'm a distraction. And I need to work around the ways that we do that, to build relationships, to make sure that people are comfortable with my presence when I'm doing this work. This means that we need to be democratic in our approach. We need to consult with the subjects of research regarding these times. We need to talk and respect them. Now, this means some do coding. We use statistical procedures. But sometimes we forget the context. I can conduct a survey, for instance, in England using similar tools, and I can apply analysis of variance or other statistical procedures to it possibly. But unless I understand the context this data is coming from, it's very difficult for me to interpret fairly what I'm seeing. I need to spend time analyzing the context as well as analyzing the data. And that's something that sometimes gets forgotten in this kind of research. Adopting a multi-perspectives approach can be helpful. So, for example, recently doing some work in Cambodia, I did some transcription of interviews, as did some colleagues from Cambodia, and shared our interpretation of what we're seeing. And we sought to understand each other's perspective. And an important part of that is returning to the data source for clarification and verification. Involving people who are the subjects of research in the analysis of research can be a very fruitful way forward. So, to give you an example, which was something I think quite innovative that we did on the research I did in Ireland, Project Iris, we did a focus group with some children. In fact, we did many focus groups with children. And then one of the things we would do was give them the transcript, play back the recording, and get them to discuss what they had discussed as part of the analysis of the data. That gave us a lot of new insights, and it gave us an interpretation that we sometimes hadn't expected. It's a time-consuming process, I accept that, but it is a way of being very respectful to the people that we're working with. And then respectful reporting. Now, obviously, we all report honestly. When we write our papers for academic journals, we present our data, we make sure that the evidence is all clear, and hopefully, when we publish our papers, there's a high degree of transparency. We do need to disseminate work through peer-reviewed journals. The peer review process is really important. It is a way of other people with expertise saying, yes, this is valid work. Yes, this is useful. But actually, as researchers, we need to be respectful of the people in formats that are easily accessed, easily understood by the subjects of research. Taking the time, for instance, to write for magazines as well as for academic journals. Now, I have to say some of my academic colleagues cringe at the idea that we would report in a newsletter. We want to get this information to as wide an audience as possible. Disseminating in formats that can be interpreted. Going back to the field and talking to people. Several of the projects I've worked in have been with people who would not be able to read an academic paper. They wouldn't be able to read a research report. Many of them can't read, full stop. And it's incredibly important that we go back and talk to these people, disseminate to them face-to-face what we found, and help them to understand our interpretation of what we've seen in the field. Dissemination needs to be at multiple levels. We should not just do the research, publish the paper, and forget about it. We have a duty of care and a duty of responsibility to those we work with, particularly those who are in any way vulnerable. So I'm just going to give you an example now to finish this so that we can have some questions. I know I said I'd finish I did start a little late. Acknowledged and clearly available in anything that we reported. This was important because we felt that in a country which is so poor and where, to be quite honest, there's been a lot of corruption in the past, the people we were working with needed to know what our motivations were. In my experience, many of the big organizations who are improve the lives of other people to contact me on this email address. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Professor, for the excellent presentation.
Okay.
Yes, Bonita, you can ask those questions. Bonita? Bonita, are you there?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Bonita.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I was just disconnected. But thank you so much for Vulnerable Lives, conducting research respectfully. Your presentation was and poignant, which sharply invigorated our emotional sensitivities while conducting research on vulnerable and groups at risk. Now we will go ahead and ask the questions to the resource person. So there are a few questions. Can you please take them, sir?
Yes, of course. Please, you ask.
Yeah. The first question is, kindly explain the precautionary points to be considered while designing the instrument for data collection.
Okay. The development of research instruments. I'm sure that most people who are listening to this are used to developing things like questionnaires, interview schedules, etc. But we tend to do that as researchers in isolation. We tend to sit at a desk or sit with a group of colleagues and devise a questionnaire or an interview schedule or a focus group schedule or observation forms or whatever we're going to use. I would suggest that sometimes these things go wrong in the field because we haven't actually considered the local context enough. So at that stage of preparation, I would always advocate working with people who are actually in situation. So going back to the Sierra Leone interview questions, we were sending them backwards and forwards to people in Sierra Leone, from people from disability groups, from other academics who we'd met in Sierra Leone, in order that they could confirm to us that we were understood, but would be colored by the people we were working with. So I think that although that's a time-consuming process, it is a useful process in terms of, for a start, building confidence, and you are interested in more than just their data. You're interested in the term cerebral.
Hello.
Hi, Sheila.
Is that the question on developing good writing skills, Bonita?
No. It's about research on revision.
Maybe I could read one question for you.
Yeah.
How to develop good writing skills and suggest writing courses which help both research writing and book writing.
Very good question. Yes, I've spent a bit of time actually in India running workshops on this, and it's something close to my heart. Writing is clear writing. That's the first thing I would say. For instance, in my PhD students, is that the purpose of writing is not to sound clever. We need to write in a way which is fit for an audience. And I'm not saying we don't use technical terms. Obviously, we need to talk about statistical procedures, or we need to talk about triangulation and all of these issues. That's important. So we need to write in a way that is fit for audience. Who's going to write about research? The chances are you've got a lot to say. But writing something very simple, specific, definitely, and get everything into one paper. It's really, really difficult to get everything covered in a simple way. And the last thing I would say is, please, those of you who do read the requirements of the journal. Something from 2 weeks ago, I was asked to review a paper for a journal. The particular journal said been sent, it was 11,500 words. Immediately you say, this isn't suitable for the journal. For example, I collected system through the Right to Free and Compulsory Education Act, the RTE, the Indian legislation, and had exactly the circumstance you're talking about. Some people, for instance,